Show again, and today I'm going to show you how to replace a muffler on 94 to 97 Accords. You can definitely hear we have a leak somewhere. It actually sounds worse on camera than it did in person. You can really hear the noise increase on deceleration. Now the best way to jack up the rear of the vehicle is to use the rear cross member here. Start by using the center point, then you can get your jack stands in. It may be difficult to set the jack stands evenly when raising the vehicle from the center, so leave them at their lowest settings and lower the vehicle onto them. Place the jack stands so they cradle the pinch wells ahead of the rear tires. This is the same place where the owner's manual will tell you to place the jack when changing a tire. Then you can go to the right or left side of the cross member. Jack the vehicle up. Raise the jack stand, lower down, and repeat the process on the other side. The reason why I recommend using the rear cross member instead of this hook, you could use this hook if you want, it's perfectly fine, is that the cross member is lower so that you get a higher lift with your jack from over here than if you use the hook over here. Now let's start up the vehicle and try to figure out where the noise is coming from. We're going to try to isolate whether it's coming from the rear, the midsection of the vehicle, or under the hood. Now I'm at the rear of the vehicle, where the exhaust noise is the loudest. So I'm going to check the muffler, the pipe going to the muffler and the V-pipe. And you can see our leaks right here at this exhaust bracket. If you look closely, you can see condensation actually being blown out of the pipe by the exhaust gaskets. Here's our muffler, and as you can see down there, there's our leaky pipe, and that's part of the muffler assembly. So I'm just going to disconnect the muffler from that flange back there where it connects to the B pipe. Here's the flange that we have to remove. You can see it's held on with 2 nuts and they're badly rusted. Now, these aren't ordinary nuts and bolts, they're studs which are pressed in on the other side of the flange. I'll show you that in a minute. On this particular vehicle, these aren't studs because the muffler has apparently been replaced before. Normally there would be studs that are pressed in into this side of the flange, but as you can see here under all this rust, that's a hex head. So this is an ordinary setup here. You just have a bolt going through with a nut on the other side. Since the nuts are badly rusted, I'm going to use an oxyacetylene torch to heat the nut red hot, which will allow me to easily remove it with a socket and ratchet. If you're dealing with the standard OE setup that uses studs, this is the best option, which is why I'm going to show it here. If you don't have a torch and you're dealing with studs in the flange, here are some other options. The first option is to spray the nuts with penetrating oil and let it sit for a while and try removing them again. Honestly, in the Northeast, where the roads are salted in the winter and the exhaust system rusts heavily, I haven't had much luck with penetrating oil. The second option is to cut the nut. Get an angle die grinder or a Dremel tool with a cutting wheel and cut the nut on an angle. You want to be careful not to cut through to the threads. After you've gone a little bit, get a chisel, put it in that cut slot, and smack it with a hammer. What that'll do is it'll act like a wedge and hopefully spread the nut apart and release that tension, preventing you from removing it. At that point you should be able to spin it off. Now if you've already attempted to remove it and ended up shearing off the stud, then your job's going to get a little bit more complicated. Then what you have to do is obviously get the old pipe off. You want to heat this flange up, not the stud itself, the flange itself, until it gets red hot. Then you want to get an air hammer, put it on the end of the stud while it's still red hot, and knock it out the other side. If you don't have an air hammer, you can use a punch and a mini sledge to knock it out. After you knock it out, then you can just go get an ordinary bolt, slip it through, put a nut on the other side, and you're done. It is possible to heat the flange enough to drive a stud out without an oxyacetylene torch, but you need to use MAP gas, which comes in yellow disposable cylinders instead of propane, and a high-intensity torch head. These torch heads produce a swirl flame and most have a push-button igniter. The brass valve type of torch head with a pencil flame that needs to be ignited manually won't work. If you only have nuts and bolts to deal with, just cut the nuts off flush with the flange with a Dremel tool or angle grinder with a cutoff wheel. You'll be replacing the muffler anyway, so you don't need to worry about damaging the flange or pipe on the muffler side. Now before you start, make sure you can get a socket onto these nuts. Sometimes they can accumulate so much rust that it's difficult to get a socket on there. The instant you heat that up red, you want to get a socket on there and get it off as quickly as possible. So you may have to wiggle and push to get it to fit. And it comes off nice and easy. I guarantee if you tried this without heating it, you would have stripped the nut. Super easy. With those fasteners off, you can just separate the flanges. Just making sure. There we go. Now that they're separated, we can get the hangers off and drop the muffler. Now there are 3 hangers holding the muffler to the vehicle. You've got one here, one here, and of course the one where our leak is down here. Now getting these hangers off doesn't have to be difficult. And an easy way to get them off is to just spray a little bit of silicone spray onto them before you remove them. Use only silicone spray. Other lubricants could damage the rubber. Just spray it right on that peg right there. See, you could pull them off by hand that way. No need for tools or anything like that. And these just pull off to the back and up. And you could just let the entire muffler down. And then just pull it out with the studs in the flange.
Here's why it isn't worth it to just repair the pipe.
Because the muffler body is in the same poor condition. If this pipe's rusted out, the insides of the muffler are equally rusted out. And how you can easily tell is just give the muffler a shake. This muffler's done. Now would be the time to take off your exhaust hangers. You put them on here. You put them on the component first. Then you put them onto the vehicle. You could actually reuse these, but I've purchased new ones. It's a good idea to replace them whenever you replace an exhaust component. How to tell if you can reuse them or not is just look at the hanger itself. Does it look like it's stretched out, which would cause the exhaust components to sag? And also, does it have fine cracks along the side? If it has that, that means the hanger's about to fail. Replace it. But if they're in good shape like these, they're not stretched, you don't have any cracks on them, you can reuse them. Now I couldn't let this go. This is an aftermarket exhaust. This is not the one that came with the vehicle. Up here is an OE Honda exhaust, and I'm just going to compare build quality real quick. Let's just start at the tailpipe. You can see on the Honda OE part, the tailpipe is larger than aftermarket. Let's look at the brackets. On the aftermarket, you can see they're just cheaply welded to the outside of the body here and here. On the Honda part, the brackets are welded to a piece of steel here and here that is then welded to the body to give it extra support. Let's check where the inlet pipe to the muffler is welded. On the aftermarket, you just have a plain weld right here, and that's it. On the Honda, of course, you have a weld here, welding the pipe to the muffler body, but you also have this support piece, which is welded to the muffler body, and then also welded to the pipe further down to relieve stress at this joint down here.
You'll also see there's another support for the muffler inlet pipe down here.
Now, more importantly is this bracket here, which on the aftermarket part was just welded directly to the pipe. You can see when I push on it, I can open it up. And on the Honda part, you can see they took the bracket, they welded it to another piece of steel, and they welded it in not one place, but two places, here and here. And the point I'm trying to make is, you get what you pay for. You're better off going with OE parts if you can. They're built better, and they'll last longer.
I also did a price comparison. The difference between the old aftermarket muffler and the OE one was $30. Money well spent on the OE part based on superior build quality alone, in my opinion. Whoever did this before me decided to slather RTV all over the flange, which I'm going to have to remove to get the old crush gasket off. To make it easier to scrape the flange, I dropped the pipe by removing two exhaust hangers downstream. I'm supporting the pipe with the old muffler so I don't stress the flex pipe. It also keeps the pipe off the ground so it's easier to work. A gasket scraper is the best tool to use, but you can use a straight razor or sharp chisel too. Pop the new gasket on.
Fits on the end of the pipe that extends through the flange. Now put the hangers on the muffler first. Be aware that these two hangers are a different size than the hanger that goes on the back. And just like before, to make the job easier, a little bit of silicone spray. I'm going to spray the upper hole for when I mount the new bushing. Same thing for the rear hanger. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install the flange from the new muffler onto the flange of the B pipe. Then I'm going to install the rubber hanger right here. Make sure the hangers in the back are off to the side.
You'll notice I didn't remove the old fasteners yet. They're pretty rusted to the flange, so they'll make it easier to get the first exhaust hanger installed. I'll knock them out with a hammer after all the rubber hangers are in place.
And I'm going to install the rear hanger. There you go. Now these particular fasteners are M10, that's 10 millimeter diameter, by 1.25, that's the thread pitch, by 30 millimeters long. You only need to put a washer on the bolt, not on the nut, because the nuts are flange nuts.
The flange nuts are from the dealer. I always keep a bag of them on hand. Check the description for the part number. The bolts and washers are from the hardware store.
Now one thing you can do to make this job easier in the future is to put some anti-seize on these bolts. Just put a little bit on it and just spread it with your fingers. And that's all you need.
A little bit of anti-seize goes a long way. You just want to fill the valleys of the threads. You don't want any big globs.
Now in order to crush this gasket evenly, you want to go from side to side. Don't just tighten up one side all at once and then try to tighten up the other side.
You want to tighten the nuts evenly until the flanges come together.
And you're done. Let's hear what it sounds like now.